Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Overwatch World Cup 2019. My name is Bren. I'm joined by Sideshow. We're going to be bringing you this game live commentary. You may know us from the Overwatch League, of course. We're heading into our next game, which is bound to be a banger. It's South Africa versus Singapore. Straight into the action. As you can see, the initial control map is going to be Busan. And, two teams have a lot to prove on this world stage, particularly South Africa is a team I really want to just highlight and focus on as well, because in a similar story to India, they come from a region where, the support isn't necessarily there compared to a lot of these other teams, and this is going to be one of their first real opportunities to prove themselves on a big world stage.
Absolutely, and neither of these teams have played so far. We're joining the beginning of Bracket E, so we don't really have a read on how good either of these teams are going to be. It's possible that we have an interesting, fairly even matchup on our hands here, and already Singapore are getting more aggressive.
Yep, you can see running this typical Doomfist Reaper composition, and it's going to be Bubble Kitty. Fantastic name, if I do say so myself. Is going to get the opening pick there onto 20, as Singapore are leading with a nice early advantage. Follows up with a second one. Looks like Singapore have a very good read on the way this game has gone so far, and this will mean that they take the initial cap here on map 1 between these two teams.
Yeah, Singapore were just a little more aggressive in how they planted their tank line at the beginning, and then they spread out. Bubble Kitty took a 1v1 while Azealia managed to create a little bit of space and try and go in for a pick. So I like the default way that Singapore is playing so.
We'll see what they can do as they have the coalescence. They're going to lead it in with the initiation for that. Traded out by both these teams that are falling so low. And Bubble Kitty initiated into the backline there. Was set up by his main tank as well. And with that, it's going to be another team fight win right now for Singapore. They seem to be very, very acquainted with the meta, the way it's supposed to be played. And South Africa on the other side are trying to just pave their own way, if you will, with the May Reaper composition. We've seen teams like Italy run this kind of composition to great success so far during the Overwatch 2019 World Cup. And for these teams, it can often be a great alternative if you don't quite have the grasp of this kind of Doomfist and Reaper composition.
Yeah, it's a little simpler. You want to play aggressive, you want to isolate people with the May walls. Nice halt going up there. Azalea's going to be able to find a couple of people, utilize the Meteor Strike to get out of jail. And South Africa
punch comes in.
People.
Seismic slam into the uppercut once more. It looks very, very one-sided so far for Singapore. Another very easily won team fight, if I dare say so myself. Only two ultimates being used there, the Meteor Strike and the Death Blossom for Singapore. A good showing from them. Of course, they have they've had access to very high levels of competition, being the geographical location that they are. It's kind of this hot pot of great teams to kind of practice against. Whereas South Africa playing with the ping disadvantage a lot of the time, but that opening pick really does set things up quite nicely now. You can see the ice block used quite defensively now by South Africa, leading it in. There's going to be a good flux. Sapphire used to negate it, which means that they're going to be getting too much value out of it. In fact, as well as that, you're going to see that supercharger taken down, which means South Africa have an opening, and they're going to lead it all the way in. 20, leading the charge of the Hellfire shotguns. 1 click, 2 click, 3 clicks, 4. Count with Brennan Hook if you're looking for more. And well, Bubble Kitty comes back in. 2 more picks for him as well, and he has turned this fight despite the fact that South Africa had a great opening. The Blizzard will come out. This is still potentially winnable for South Africa. Like a Luke, though. 3 picks for him on the May. Still alive. The ice will going to be used defensively, but Bubble Kitty answering back. I believe this is now 4 kills for him, and they are having an absolute whale of a time.
Singapore are going to be able to come out with the advantage in this fight and this round. Find a first point on the board, but South Africa had their moments, like a Luke with a nice Blizzard towards the end.
Yep.
Resulted in a 3K. A decent showing from them, but it's Singapore fairly firmly in control right now of Busan.
I want to set the scene for people a little bit, because I feel like you're going to be looking at this match and you're going to be wondering, I think there was some toxicity in the chat I was reading about a little bit earlier with the India game, India versus
very rude
versus their opposition. You got to put yourselves in the shoes of these players. Not only have they traveled thousands and thousands of kilometers and miles to actually be here, this is their first opportunity to perform on the world stage in a region where they don't have access to a lot of high-level competition. Sometimes they don't even have access to servers to actually play the game
like South Africa
at a high level. And South Africa, I mean, you can't get more south of Africa than South Africa. You are quite literally at the very south point of it.
Let's do geography and counting with Brandon Hook.
Sure. But I've, having chats with people from South Africa, they often have to play with these very high pings. This is a fantastic opportunity for these players to really perform on the world stage.
And look at the composition that they're running. They run the Widowmaker and the Pharah.
I love it.
Trying to make things interesting. Shapeshifter on the Winston as well. It's optimistic to run a Winston into a Reaper at the best of times, even in your ranked games. But he did actually find a pick during the middle of that fight, and they forced Singapore to play very aggressive and shut down the Reaper. So there is potential here if they can play this composition and really bait 20, or maybe find a pick or two with him.
I gotta say, I love this from 20. I mean, the minerals of the man to pull out a Widowmaker in 2019
against two shields.
You just don't really see it. He's got to hit the headshots though. That's what really matters here, and it's still Singapore's game. The Resurrect comes out for Squishy, brings him back up alive. Rocket's going to be raining down for Leica Luke, trying to find these big. Squishy actually ends up getting the better of it. The Coalescence trying to run them down. A very optimistic accretion from Xenofly. Does not find the value they were looking for, but still a very winnable fight right now for South Africa. Still, however, backing off Singapore. Managed to temper the aggression coming out from South Africa. 20 not really hitting the shots that he needed to. Got to find those one-shot, one-kills.
Yeah, so far they're not really finding value out of their Widowmaker or their Pharah. Xenofly is doing a reasonably good job at being able to utilize his barriers and put them in the way of both DPS, finding these angles to shut down one, utilize the space and positioning to shut down another, and Squishy falls again at the beginning of a fight.
Yep, and the trouble is when you're running this Widowmaker, when you're running this Pharah, you've got to get some value out of it. You've got to basically make Singapore commit some of the resources at least in trying to shut you down. Because otherwise, Singapore, as you saw just there, they just win the ground war. They ran straight over them with the speed boost. They absolutely demolished the tank line, and despite the tank line having mobility, guess who doesn't have mobility? Squishy on the Ana, who's just sitting there like a little potato, just in the back line, you know?
Yes, and it's not particularly Squishy's fault, but you might want to see him switch over to the Moira at some point here.
Yeah.
And it's actually Ashpro that's making a switch. Going over to D.Va, providing a little bit more assistance for his Winston.
There we go, 20 picks up the kill, and the barrage from Leica Luke doesn't find that much value, but puts in enough damage to finish him off. Now we start to see the ultimates being committed here. The supercharger was used by Singapore, but didn't actually get placed down on the ground. It got cancelled out. Now the sound barrier by Jervis is going to try and find any sort of value whatsoever. The Winston's Primal Rage by South Africa just trying to stall this fight out. But again, it is quite futile when you're running it into the Hellfire shotguns of a Reaper. Almost a classic counter, if you will, between those two characters. And Singapore are going to be taking a very quick map 1 in a 2-0 round fashion. So very strong showing from Singapore here.
Yeah, dominant showing from Singapore. And South Africa still getting into this series. They're a group of players that haven't really had the opportunity to play and practice against top competition on low ping. Can you imagine playing on 200 ping to the European servers in a Doomfist meta? It's not the best situation for practice.
It's impossible to say. It's actually impossible to play the sort of meta as it stands on a high ping environment. This is why you start to see a lot of these teams, and this is the reason why it's so important that teams like South Africa, like teams like India as well, are able to get these opportunities to come out to the Overwatch World Cup and really showcase what talent they have from that region, because oftentimes you find themselves very locked away. I mean, this was the case for Australia and New Zealand for the longest time as well, as they were so segregated away from the rest of the world in terms of the internet connections available to them. Obviously, the scene developed in their own spaces over time. Little bubbles were produced, and you do have these fantastic little pocket teams that can come out swinging at these events. And this is why these events are important at the end of the day, you know, for these regions, for reasons like this. Give them a bit of experience on the main stage.
Absolutely, and you never know where the next big talent is going to come out from. There have been many players over the course of Overwatch. You think of people like Mickey at the very first Overwatch World Cup that were discovered and joined teams and ended up being incredibly successful, some making the Overwatch League, some winning championships, some being picked up to contenders or academy teams. The Overwatch World Cup is more than just a tournament. It's a showcase of talent from around the world and an opportunity to represent your nation and play with pride.
Now, with that being said, Singapore are playing very well, and it's a good showing from them. But this is a similar situation of what it felt like, Josh, when we were casting earlier today with India and Italy, and we didn't really know quite how strong Italy were going to be.
True.
It's not really a true showing of skill as of yet. Now, that's not to say that South Africa cannot turn up right now on the hybrid maps. Remember, it's a different sort of set of skills that you need to try and take away from this. Control testers, control as a game type, will test a lot of your fundamentals when it comes to Overwatch. But when you move over to hybrid, there's a lot more room for flexibility for players to really pop off on unconventional roles. So we will be moving into Hollywood as the next map. And it's a map that we actually haven't seen for quite some time. Remember, this is the initial round in Group E.
Yeah.
First time we're seeing both of these teams battling it out.
Just to run you guys through the rest of Group E as well, in case you're interested, Portugal are going to be playing against Saudi Arabia. That's going to be ZP and Avast covering that game over on the Overwatch Contenders Twitch channel. And that's the winner of that is going up against the Netherlands. The winner of this game that you're looking at right now, Singapore versus South Africa, they are going up against Finland. So very, very tough bracket for either of these two teams to run. Finland, the strong favorites, I think, in this group. Although Netherlands could be a kind of dark horse pick as well. They have a couple of very decent players on that roster.
Yeah, in fact, actually, Team Russia actually did an AMA recently, and I asked them a question. I said, what team do you expect to be showing up that a lot of people are sleeping on? Netherlands was the team that came up.
Yeah, that's interesting.
In quite a returning fashion. And of course, they get a buy into the second round of Group E because of the previous performances of this team, of this country, from other World Cups. The same with Finland. So the winner of this match here that we are watching today is going to be playing against Finland. A very tough opponent, but someone who key players.
Yes, absolutely. I think for any team in this tournament, there's a potential to make a bit of a bracket run. You catch somebody on a bad day or you have a particularly good day, there's always potential for upsets. But for a lot of these teams, it's less about the results and about making a deep run and more so about showcasing their part of the world, how they play, getting their names out there, getting experience on the big stage, and just being able to represent their country on the main stage. These are two teams, I believe, both Singapore and South Africa, who were crowdfunded by the community to be able to come here as well.
Yeah.
The backing and the fans behind them have managed to fund these teams towards here so that they can play and represent their countries on the big stage for Overwatch.
Well, here we have it. We're heading over to Hollywood, and we're going to see what kind of defense is put up now. Now, Singapore going to be on the attacking side of things. And I wonder what kind of composition they are going to run out with.
Why do you think nobody lives on the maps? Where are people?
Well, there are houses here, as you can see. Look around the map right now. There's windows to the left.
But where is everyone?
Windows to the right. I mean,
They're
they're
all
clearing
hiding
out.
inside?
It's a war zone. It's a battle being fought over the point. Why would they stick around? You evacuate in that scenario.
I mean, you often get caught unawares. There aren't always opportunities to evacuate.
I mean,
Evacuations in some scenarios can make things even more difficult. As
they're hiding.
You know, important supply lines are cut off, or water and electricity.
There is no more important point to fight over than Hollywood, the culture of America.
Yep, you really got to get that limousine.
Yep, the center point of that. That is what they are all playing for on this map here today. It's not pride between countries. It's to deliver the limousine occupants. I don't really know. But regardless of that,
a nice drop down from South Africa actually. Playing with the May, they managed to isolate a couple of targets. 20 finds the first pick, and he's going to deliver a second onto Xenofly. So
fantastic.
Singapore, they've been repelled.
Yeah, really big fan of this one here. South Africa repelling them. As you said, great engage coming in from the high ground. And we're switching back more over to this Reaper, this May composition. This is what they were running earlier on Busan. They didn't have the greatest success with it. But I mentioned earlier, sometimes you just need to change a pace, a different map. And everything can start to click a little bit more. We see a second attempt now coming out from Singapore. Almost having the coalescence, but South Africa do have their own. Squishy's going to be unleashing it onto them. For now, trying to keep his team back up, trying to deal a lot of damage. Getting a little bit of value out of it, but the team's not really stacking up, and that gives an opening for Bubble Kitty to move into the back line. Shapeshifter brought down here, and Singapore just needed one little push in the right direction. They find themselves the winners of this point.
I like the attempt from South Africa. You know, they're going for the same thing again, trying to utilize the high-tempo plays where they drop from the high ground.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to do it. You have to try and find value from that May wall. But the second time around, Singapore are ready for it. A little bit of a disengage and a bit of baiting of their Orisa, and they manage to capitalize and find the picks. But there is always this Blizzard to be able to find use from. If they can avoid dying to Azalea here, like a Luke has a big Blizzard that can allow them to regain control.
See what they can do. Therefore, someone was available. Great accretion coming out there from Singapore. My word, Xenofly just absolutely knocked 20 to the floor. He's going to teleport up to the high ground now, has the Death Blossom available, going to let it rip. There you go, there's one kill. Followed up with a Meteor Strike as well, and Primary Fires will do the rest there. As you can see, Singapore will be pushing this cart forwards. No contestation just yet, but South Africa have ultimates in the bank and a possibility to recontest this one.
Good aggression from Singapore. They play so far forwards that South Africa don't really see an opportunity to go for the Blizzard. They could have tried it, but it was in a small alleyway where you're not really guaranteed that like a Luke will be able to freeze everybody and you'll be able to finish off the targets. Now though, South Africa are on the aggression.
There we have it, yeah, Superchargers laid down by Shapeshifter, and they want to use this aggression and damage to try and take them out, but ends up getting taken out by Bubble Kitty, prioritized, the Flux also used here, and there's not going to be a Soundfire to stop this one, but it matters not. Fantastic accretion comes in from Ashbro, nails it onto Kame, and that will cancel out the Coalescence. A big ultimate to the gate from that one.
And South Africa are starting to dip their toes into the pools of success here on Hollywood. They are had a couple of fights now where they've had good executions. So far, it's when they're all decisive and move forward as a team. They isolate targets and pick them off. This Gravitic Flux comes in. Soundfire is there to reply, though.
Picks up 3 of them, and as you said, the Soundfire is
Blizzard.
there to reply, but the Blizzard as well means that they are going to be able to get 2 picks off the back of it. However, in the meantime, Singapore have worked their way into the backline, and Azalea finds 2 kills, finds a third. 4? I don't believe what I'm witnessing, but there we have it. It's going to be a nice, clean little fight there by Singapore. They recognized that they had lost that fight in the backline, so they pushed past it, pushed past the limitations, moved all the way into the backline, and absolutely brutalized them. Azalea with a great cleanup and great clutch.
Oh, fantastic awareness from him, and South Africa just caught napping. They've got double support ult if they choose to re-engage. It looks like they do! Woohoo! 20 is sent, packing for 6.
Soundfire now being committed by South Africa along with the Coalescence, and we'll see what they can get done, but it's not that much. As we see, the Seismic Slam uppercut combo, too much damage to deal with, and that punch, I mean...
Oh, that's just brutal, straight through a doorway.
Yep, Squishy gets squish, turned squishy, I don't know.
Absolutely flattened. Okay, like a Luke pulling out the Bastion for the point C defense. I like it. Nothing's worked so far. You want to test your opponents. You want to see if they make mistakes when they come up against a Bastion. It's an easier composition to execute.
That's a Zephyr in the industry, but a little bit early than...
yeah, it's a very premature Zephyr.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, we'll see them try and defend this one with the unorthodox pick. And they have this Supercharger. The Supercharger is everything right now, but the trouble with running a Bastion is you lack a lot of mobility if you want to try and engage into them with the Supercharger.
It's a weird sightline as well. It doesn't really catch that much, and Bubble Kitty can almost drop on them.
Whoa, the Supercharger with the Death Blossom laid down, but look at that. Wonderful little immortality field by South Africa. Keeps them alive for just a few moments, enough to try and stagger this fight out for their advantage. And it looks like 20 will just do that as he cleans up 2 kills. A system pumps the damage in, and a reasonable defense now from South Africa.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Ashbro as well, who used his kinetic grasp and just stood right in front of Leica Luke, making sure that his Bastion stayed alive even though Bubble Kitty was utilizing that Death Blossom. Soaked it all up, converted it to shields, kept the Bastion alive. And now South Africa, they're in a decent position here. They've got to contest the payload though.
Yes, this Bastion causing them a little bit of issues, but Ashbro goes down to the accretion.
Oh, they're not contesting the payload.
And now the Flux comes down, 2 people still in the payload, taking the team fight in the wrong location. This cart might just move in without anybody contesting this. 2 meters, finally somebody fades onto the point, but at that point it is a little bit too late. And Ashbro switch over to the Wrecking Ball just to try and get a contest going, but it will be 2 minutes and 6 seconds for Singapore. And a decent attack and almost a reasonable defense there coming out from South Africa in the tail ends of it. I like the switch up. I like the Bastion. Just needs a little bit more oomph.
Yeah, it's a decent strategy. It works out very well in this meta in particular. I thought that it would be run all the time, honestly, when it came to the World Cup, because it requires not very much team coordination to be able to execute and a lot of team coordination to be able to break. So that seems to make it almost the perfect strategy for World Cup. But we haven't seen too many teams default with it. They've mostly tried to play the meta on most of these maps.
Yep. And I can kind of see the reasoning behind that. I mean, these kind of flexing compositions, if you will, I'm not going to call them cheese comps because a lot of teams do use a lot of the Bastion and a lot of them may just on a variety of maps. But generally speaking, the neutral composition that a lot of these teams are running is going to be the Doomfist, is going to be the Reaper. And if you're going to make it far in this tournament, you need to be well-versed on that comp.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to be going up against stronger teams, and they will be defaulting back to that. And if they are more organized, if they are more structured, they are going to be able to take wins against you, even if you are running these more unorthodox compositions, I should say.
Well, it looks like South Africa are probably going to stick to the May Reaper comp that found them limited success, but some success over the course of their Hollywood defense. From what we've seen with Italy and from what we've seen in the past as well, the way that you play this composition is that you want to try and isolate people with a May wall, separate the front line from the back line, and get your DPS in position to melt the players that you've caught off. The Sigma, the Orisa, these are all great targets. Separate them from their healing, stop them backing up, and run them over.
And we'll see if they can do just that. South Africa moving forward, and we do have a technical pause. And I wonder what it could be.
Yep. Very little way of knowing at this point.
Yep.
The players, you know, are in a completely separate hall during this day on Thursday. So they are all kind of next to each other, all playing on similar setups.
I'm going to blame Singapore.
What, randomly?
Well, I saw everyone from South Africa roll out.
Okay.
So I didn't... here's the thing. If everyone's rolling out, generally speaking, there's probably not going to be an issue. But on the defense, you know, you might find that, you know, the keyboard, the mouse stops working, something like that. Could be a pause for other reasons, of course. But yeah, I'm just going to blame him out of the blue. I don't have any information to back up that. It's a hunch.
Instead of blaming either team, I'm going to say that we'll see what the issue is, and we'll probably get back to everybody after a short break.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are jumping straight back into the action with South Africa versus Singapore. No warning. Here we have it.
That's the way we like to do it.
Yeah, and
No warning for South Africa either, as Singapore just collapse onto them and Bubble Kitty gets a 4K.
There you go. Bubble Kitty. I feel like it's a very marketable name.
It is. It's fantastic. I feel like it should be the name of a brand somehow. It's
Yes,
it's a cuddly name.
It's a cuddly name.
It doesn't really fit with Reaper. It doesn't fit a Reaper player.
But it
Bubble
does, because I use a Hungro Spark skin with Reaper.
Right, because it's like it's the mixture of edgy but also cute that makes it work.
Josh, shut up about Bubble Kitty, okay? Well, actually, no, I'm going to keep talking about Bubble Kitty because we're going in with the point right now. The Coalescence is led in with South Africa. Jervis is going to be the first casualty in that one, but Bubble Kitty continues to impress not only in the merchandise department, but also the Overwatch department. The Death Blossom Unleashed. It's going to be a pick onto Ashbro, and that will be a team kill for Singapore. Great defense so far. 2 minutes 40 on the clock. South Africa, they got to change some stuff up.
Yeah, they've still got a bunch of time, but so far their attacks have not been particularly effective. They haven't been able to isolate people with the May walls very well. And although double shield makes it difficult to freeze people up, if you play off angles like Hearthbeat was doing for Italy, you can find a lot of success. Nice stun!
Whoa, that's
really great
fantastic.
accretion from Ashbro.
Yes, that is amazing. You need to be on point with those, especially when they try and get cheeky with a lot of these flanks. Bubble Kitty forced back to use the Ray form. Michael taking a lot of damage, using an early ice block.
Get him!
Freeze down,
Get him!
Jersey. No, please, there you go. He gets the kill in the end. It's going to be an even trade, but the Supercharger is down. Ends up getting taken out, or at least expiring for the time being. Accretion chunked up, and Azalea is coming straight back in. Look at this damage being pumped into the sound barrier now being used
sound
by
barrier
South
has been
Africa.
used. It only caught 2 players. It only caught onto Visions and like a loop.
Not ideal, but still, look at this. Singapore with another fantastic defense in this. The Coalescence is used at the tail end of the fight, and it clinches it.
South Africa with double tank ultimate plus a Death Blossom to use here. A Gravitic Flux into an enormously damage boosted Death Blossom could be exactly what they need to secure the fight. But this Flux has to be huge from Ashbro.
We'll see if they can do it. And it has to be a big Flux indeed, because he used early on, catches 2 players in the back. The Meteor Strike also used on Bubble Kitty. Taken out early, now the Death Blossom going to get eaten up by that kinetic grasp. On the side of the defense, Azalea forces his way back. Going to be getting healed up. See, look at his off angles by Xenofly. Creature comes out, connects onto 2. Great ult, pulls them back onto the point. And it's going to be another defense by Singapore. The micro ability usage just seems a lot better when it comes to the way they're able to combo up a lot of their abilities with the halts, with the accretions. They're finding value from it.
Yeah, nice understanding of how the game is played at the moment in this current meta from Singapore as well. They play back, they save their sound barrier for the Flux, and they also have Azalea going aggressive as South Africa engage to pull them apart.
Oh, look at this aggressive. I like this play. You don't want to let the team aggress onto you when they have the May. You want to try and take the fight to them. It's exactly what they're going to be doing with this Coalescence as well. The team runs forward, takes full advantage of the space, the damage, the sustain that's available to them, and 20 seconds remaining for South Africa to try and make a push attempt.
Ashbro goes over to the Wrecking Ball. He really wants to be able to get there in time. 10 seconds to be able to touch. And he's going, he's flying through, he hits the ceiling, he's all over the place.
Oh my word. He does
is
manage
gonna
to touch
make
in
it.
the end. That's going to be 3 seconds remaining, and that's going to be a pick though onto Visions, taken out. Now that we see Bubble Kitty in the back line trying to make some magic happen with that Death Blossom. Gets taken down, but not before finding the pick onto Lycaluke. The Blizzard forced out early though. Now the Flux onto one of them. Meteor Strike takes out 20. Xenofly up on the point is contesting it to great success. Accretion's not quite going to catch anybody, but Singapore look like they're in a very strong position to get the full health necessary to secure the map win against South Africa.
Great play by Singapore. They understood what they needed to do at all times, and South Africa still have some work to do to be able to make this series competitive. They've come a long way, but they still have longer to go if they want to get back into this series.
Yeah, and with that being said, we're going to go to a short break, and as soon as the next match is happening, we'll be right there with you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Overwatch World Cup 2019. Of course, I'm Bren, joined by Sideshow. We're bringing you the action here for Singapore versus South Africa once more as we head into Rialto, map 3 in this series so far. Singapore leading 2-0, as you can see. South Africa trying to make a play here and there. But so far, Singapore have been the dominant team across the board.
They certainly have. They've been able to find success in a lot of different situations, and I'm expecting that to continue, honestly, moving forwards. I think that a lot of the teams that are coming from regions where they haven't really had opportunities to play on the main stage that often will maybe require another couple of years before they're at the level to be competitive with some of the other teams, whereas Singapore, they've had a lot of opportunity to.
I mean, the region they're in is just a hot pot of different regions to scrim against, to practice against. Of course, looking at this now, rolling out with some interesting comps. 20 wants to just flex a little bit onto the McCree, show us what he's made of, and there you have it. Xenoblade goes down almost immediately. This is a great opening for South Africa. Let's see if they can find anything off the back of it. So Bubble Kitty is there in the front line, absolutely destroying them with the shotguns, and Singapore are holding for the time being.
The McCree makes a little bit of sense, honestly, because what they've been struggling with is as they go forwards, Azalea is often in their backlines, and I think that 20 is just hoping that the flashbang and the potential to do that burst damage will stop Azalea being such a terror for them.
I mean, finding a pick right there is good enough for me. South Africa looking to press the advantage. The Coalescence is forced out of Singapore, having to use it to try and clean up the rest of this team fight. 20 pushing very far forward. Fade is going to be used defensively, and we still see them holding strong around this corner, but as you're saying, Josh, I mean, I'm a big fan of the McCree. Something needed to change. Maybe flexing over to a little bit of a more comfort role. Yeah. Something that you can, you know, sue your way out of scenarios, if you will. Flashbang, fan the hammer, all that jazz.
Absolutely. I mean, at the moment, Singapore are just stuffing them into the choke point, though. And the McCree is going to be a squishy hero that it's difficult to get value out of. But at the moment,
like
South Africa, they've found picks, particularly on the front line. This is now looking good for them.
Really doable for them. And they managed to work their way around this corner. The ults were popped off by like Luke. He ends up getting brought down as he was using the Death Blossom. But it doesn't matter, because the important thing for South Africa, the card is now moving. They're finally getting a bit of a foothold on this map. They've broken open the defense of Singapore. They're going to start to work their way further in. And you can see 20, look at this. You know exactly what's happening when you see this positioning. You've seen it in your ranked games. You're about to see it here live. I'm going to see the high noon from up high. I want to see it.
Yep, the highest of high noons.
There we go. Unleashes it. The high noon comes out. Connects up to one. The kinetic grass, though, eats a lot of the damage. The meteor strike doesn't find the target he's looking for.
But nice headshot.
Destroy that the supercharger, I should say. Singapore still pushing forward with this one on the defense. Teleport up high. Yes, the headshots are quite good, and 20 is making this very, very competitive for them. Forced into the
20 with 3 kills.
With 3 kills back to back, he's still trying to make it happen. Unfortunately, now has to shoot past this shield. Being pressured down, the Coalescence forced out. In the end, great accretion is going to cancel out the flux from the side of South Africa. Aspro, unfortunate series of events there. Doesn't quite get cancelled. He does end up getting a traded kill with Xenofly, but Singapore are still defending, and this is still also a very difficult point to try and push into. This choke point is notorious on Rialto.
It certainly is. It's very hard. The defenders have a pretty decent spawn advantage once it starts getting a little bit further, and it's just so difficult. Even though 20's getting a lot of picks, they can't push forwards particularly because that makes him vulnerable. He can only play in certain set positions.
Ashbro sent up into the air. It's going to get brought down with the gravitic flux, and now we see the Coalescence being used a little bit too late for my liking by South Africa. They wanted to try and stagger that fight out, potentially win it near the end. But it wasn't to be. Singapore still holding on to this point. Still have this little U-bend corner, if you will. It's so defendable. Look at this high ground access they've got. Look at the Meteor Strike. Look at the Supercharger and the Sound Barrier and the Coalescence. I mean, South Africa, they have their back against the wall. This is it. Do or die. They have to win this team fight, or this is their tournament hopes and dreams. Dead in the water. Oh! Pulled them together. Azalea comes in with the punch. He picked up 2. He's looking for a 3rd. He's probably going to get it if we're being honest. Not quite. His team beat him to the punch with 6 seconds remaining. South Africa only managed to push it a short amount of distance around the corner. They switched to the stall heroes, but unable to reach the cart in the end. That is complete domination by Singapore.
It really is. That is just insane from them. South Africa were never really able to get a foot in the door. The McCree was an interesting pick, certainly a different flavor, a curveball, but Singapore dealt with it really, really well. They didn't feed too many people into the flashbang. They didn't have too much difficulty being able to attack and put pressure onto him, and they just utilized the choke points very effectively.
Yeah. And now, I did say, you know, it was do or die time for South Africa. That was potentially the last fight. Incorrect. They have a sight, an opportunity to try and win this map, to try and bring
Technically
it back
true.
from the brink. And listen, I don't want to take away any hope, right, from these teams. Because you got to hammer it at home. Think of the distance that these guys have traveled to even be here. Think of what's on the line for them right now. They are representing their country. It is so far that they've had to travel to even make it to LA from South Africa. Approximately 10,772 miles.
That's insane that you have that kind of knowledge on the top of your head, honestly.
Geography was always my strong suit when it comes to, you know, my education and whatnot. Speaking, on the other hand, the English language, still getting a grasp of that.
Yeah.
Still struggling,
Yeah.
but we're getting there.
That is nearly twice as far as it is from Japan to LA.
Yeah. I mean, that might be the furthest distance a team has traveled to LA.
Oh, that's an interesting question. What about Australia?
Yeah, I mean, Australia is about 8,000 miles.
How do you know these kind of facts?
New Zealand is only going to be even less because, you know, it's actually closer to LA than Australia is. The map is a little bit deceiving. It's about 7,000 miles from New Zealand. But geography aside, Joshua Wilkinson, I've got the numbers in my head. Let's see what South Africa can do. It's full guns blazing. They've got the Bastion, they've got the Fire, and they need to pull out all the bloody stops right now if they want to have a chance of staying in this tournament. Singapore currently leading 2-0. They need one more map, and they only have to push it 70 meters to make it happen and move forward in the tournament.
Absolutely, and I love this play from South Africa. They only really have one chance of victory, and it is getting value out of this Bastion. Nice May wall from Azalea, but 20's going to find a pick on the Bubble Kitty really early on. And with the Reaper down, there is no chance that you are breaking this Bastion comp, unless the Orisa just falls to the floor.
Okay, the Christian comes out. That's going to force out the Ice Block now, but 20 is finding the picks they need. This is what you want to see from South Africa right now. They need to be going for these high-risk, high-reward plays, getting these pickoffs, aggressive angles, concussion blasts off the edge of the map.
But they're playing with the Farah instead of with the May, and that means that they don't really have somebody to block the cart apart from their Orisa. And so they've got to worry a little bit about Shapeshifter getting overrun.
Coalescence comes out now from Singapore. They're looking to seal the deal. Nip this in the bird, but 20 in the back line. Unleashes the barrage, finds two, but Bubble Kitty instantly answers back. A fantastic name once again, and Singapore are just going to push this one into the final moments. 60 meters and counting. I don't think anybody from South Africa can contest it. And that'll be it. Singapore win in a 3-0 dominant fashion. South Africa, unfortunately, going to enjoy the rest of BlizzCon, of course, but then have to go home. And they will not be advancing further into the competition. Singapore, on the other hand, it was a clean sweep for them. A very strong showing. But the question is now, how are they going to fare against Finland?
That is the question, because Singapore have just blitzed through that match, the quickest that I've seen all day long.
Yep.
South Africa go home. I want to say that you're right. I think they're probably the team that has traveled the furthest in order to get here.
Yep.
Over 10,000 miles South Africa had to travel in order to be here in Los Angeles.
I really want people to empathize with that fact as well. I mean, you're traveling so far from your home, and you literally have your country's hopes and dreams on your shoulders to perform in this environment. And if you don't have the experience in terms of a competitive environment, if you don't necessarily have the experience, there you go, suddenly they transformed into Finland. But if you don't have that kind of experience, then it is a struggle. And these kind of international events are so important for these countries to really make the most of, gain this experience, and then slowly over time become a team to be reckoned with.
You know, teams like Australia, New Zealand, teams also like Japan, for example, Thailand.
It took time.
It took time. It took many World Cup appearances and investment into their local scene for them to become a position where they could be dark horse runners or even favorites in certain matches. So South Africa will go home, unfortunately, at the hands of Singapore today, but their story is not over. It's only just over for 2019.
Absolutely. Now, looking forwards, we have Finland versus Singapore. This is the Bracket E semi-finals, and this is going to be our first look at Finland as a team.
Yeah.
Now, this is super interesting. They're missing a couple of players because of a variety of reasons, but they're going to be going up against Singapore. Singapore, honestly, not quite tested in that match either. I'd be curious to see how they're going to be standing up against a real powerhouse team.
Oh, yeah.
Finland have turned up to every single World Cup, and they have done extremely well. So if you're Singapore right now, you've got to be prepping for them super hard. We'll see you on the other side of the break.